Thank, thank you very much. You folks that are having to turn around, why don't you turn your chair around so that you don't have to feel uncomfortable? Because I'm going to talk for about 16 hours and you probably can't fall asleep that way. No, actually, I'll talk about 30 minutes. I just got this title, Distinguished Professor from Manipal University in India. Does anybody know anything about that university? Well, neither did I. But it's the largest, most prestigious university in all of India. And they have picked up a series of books I'll tell you about in a moment that I wrote to use in that university. And I just learned yesterday that the government of China is going to consider those books and recommend it to all the schools in China. So a little bit about what I'll tell you today. Everybody in China and India will know about it far before most people in the United States know about it. So what I'm going to talk about, I was asked to tell you a little bit about my background in terms of how it affected my career, so that might give you either a good role model or a bad role model, whichever you prefer. And then I'll talk about what I call do, understanding what your customers want to do, when they want to do it, why they want to do it, and so forth, as a way to assure product success. And then I'll talk a little bit about the importance of values in your organization that helps guide the decision-making and its impact upon this valley. And in fact, this building would not be here if it wasn't for the HP Way, which is the first set of values for a major corporation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the last thing I want to talk about is each of you individually. So I've done about 75 products and services over the last 47 years, generated hundreds of millions of dollars worth of revenue, had lots of successes, had a lot more failures. And the work that I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years is writing down what I learned, what went wrong, and what went right, so folks such as yourself can help avoid those mistakes. You get an idea of the types of products that I've been involved in and some of the companies that I've trained. I'm the official product management and product marketing manager trainer for Cisco, which is just down the road from here, on a worldwide basis. They offer 6 or 7 of my courses. It's my parents, my mother obviously on the left, my father on the right. Her father was born in Poland and emigrated to the United States. His father, my grandfather, was the blacksmith for the governor of Kiev, tending to about, I think it's 200 horses. And in 1914, the governor came to him, gave him the equivalent of $200 in US money, and told him to get out of the country before they kill him. And the reason for that is that he was Jewish, and there had been 6 holocausts in the Ukraine over the previous 100 or 150 years, where almost all the Jews were wiped out. So he immigrated to Baltimore, and then eventually Washington, D.C., and that's where my dad grew up. And he owned a grocery store in Georgetown at the corner of 30th and M Street, which is now a movie theater. When I was about your age, I was sitting in a gold American Motors Rambler Classic, which is the family car, in the right front seat, and we're parked, and my mom was in the left, and she turned to me and said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And nobody had ever asked that of me before. So I said, "An electrical engineer." Now, I never became an electrical engineer, and my career changed a few times. But whenever I interview somebody for a job, I ask them what they want to do when they grow up, because that helps you set your goal, some direction in where you wish to go. Then a few years later, I joined the Civil Air Patrol, where I learned about leadership, what it takes to be a leader, how to be a leader, and I also learned how to fly. And I soloed right up I-80 here in Reno after winning a scholarship from the Civil Air Patrol. And by the time I went to high school, I had finished up my private pilot's license. And this is the high school I went to. It's called Cass Technical High School in downtown Detroit, about a block from where the 1968 riots broke out. It was a pretty rough neighborhood. People would ask me what I major in, and I said it was the 70-yard dash. It was the distance from the bus stop to the front door of the school. It was an honors high school where the best middle school students throughout all of Detroit went. And finally, we got away from all of the fooling around and bullying in elementary and junior high school, and it was a wonderful place to be because everybody wanted to learn. And I started working in aeronautical technology there and studied that for 4 years. Then I went off to the University of Michigan in aerospace engineering, thinking that they had an aeronautical program there, and they had a very small one. There was a private deal between Ohio State University, my nemesis, and University of Michigan, where Ohio State got the aeronautical technology and Michigan got the aerospace. And in fact, the 3 astronauts on Apollo 15 were all aerospace engineering grads from the University of Michigan. And I don't know if you noticed in the displays downstairs, the computer labs at Michigan has created a very, very small computer which can go inside of your body for medical purposes monitoring. And that came out of the same computer technology areas that I was studying in when I was at Michigan. And after about 3 weeks in engineering school, I was bored to death, so I started wandering around the campus, and somebody had put up a little sign saying, organizing meeting for a flying club. And I was absolutely shocked that the University of Michigan did not have a flying club. So I and 4 other people got together. We started the University of Michigan Flyers, and I went to a reunion a few years ago and found that we had trained over 4,000 pilots worldwide, including the head of the Blue Angels. And that's me holding in my best Charles Lindbergh pose, probably sometime around the time I got my flight instructor's rating. And I used that to work through college and pay for college, which wasn't too much. It was only $600 a year up until I got my instructor's rating. My grandfather used to pay for that. And then in my sophomore year, Professor Wilbur Nelson came to me. He used to be the head of the department, and he was on Lyndon Johnson's Supersonic Transport Committee. And he said everything that everybody was saying about the SST was wrong. And there was this huge anti-technology feeling spreading across the nation, driven by the Democrats. The Republicans were pro-technology, the Democrats were anti-technology. And they were saying things that it was technology that was causing the environmental crisis, which was kind of silly because all technology is the organization of knowledge for practical purposes. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, it can be used to clean up the environment, it can also be used to create problems in the environment. So Professor Nelson asked me if I would be interested in starting a nationwide student organization in favor of the American SST. And he said, let's call it FAST, F-A-S-S-T, Fly America's SST. And not having any idea what I was getting myself into, by the end of my sophomore year at college, I had testified before the United States House of Representatives, before the United States Senate, and went to meetings in my pink polyester suit at the White House. There I was a 19, 20-year-old kid. The SST failed, and the FAST acronym was pretty malleable, so we changed the name to Federation of Americans Supporting Science and Technology. I formed a Space Youth Council and an Energy Youth Council. The Space Youth Council lobbied, along with myself, Congress to fund the space shuttle. We were successful on that. The Energy Youth Council, where I got funding from the Atomic Energy Commission, testified about the importance to the future of the nation and the future of the economy that we have such things as solar energy, wind energy, better batteries, energy storage, and so forth, which is now just becoming online 46 years later. So that one we failed to help avoid some of the problems that we have in the world as a result of the consumption of coal and oil. Then I moved to Minnesota since I was involved in environmental, economic, and energy issues, and formed the Environmental Balance Association there, funded by labor, industry, and agriculture. And about halfway through the 4.5 years I was there, I began to understand the concept of mediation and environmental mediation. And I became one of the world's first 2 environmental mediators, the second one, and helped resolve a dispute over an Anheuser-Busch Malt plant, and then got involved with the biggest environmental dispute of all time at that time, the reserve mining dispute, where they were dumping taconite tailings into Lake Superior. And I employed a technique that Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State, employed called shuttle diplomacy. So I was running around from Silver Bay to Duluth, Minnesota, to Cleveland, where the owners of the reserve were, to Washington, D.C., and talking to our congressmen and senators there. And I got invited to go on an executive tour on Outward Bound, and that's a Voyager's canoe in the Outward Bound, or in the Boundary Waters canoe area in northern Minnesota and southern Canada. And that's me in the middle with the big glasses. And when I got off the airplane to go on this tour, somehow the news media heard about the fact that I was going to be there. And I got off the plane, and there was a wall of television cameras wanting to interview about what's going on with the reserve mining dispute. And the Duluth Herald posted a headline, Northern Minnesota's Henry Kissinger comes to town, with my name on it. So being called that and having 25 cents, I still can't get a cup of coffee. Then HP recruited me to help them with their facilities, and I went there to the corporate PR department and handled a little bit of the public relations for one of the founders of HP, the P, David Packard, and learned about the HP way and the principles of the founding of HP and why it had been such a successful company. For 50 years, HP grew 20% a year, every year, for 50 years. And I can't think of a single other company in the world that has accomplished that. And it was because of the HP way, the HP values. Then Apple recruited me because I was a trained HP product manager. And that's the product I took to market first. It was a hard disk drive for the Apple II, the Apple III, and the Lisa. And you've got a few of them here in this building. It had an enormous space, 5 megabytes. It's really, really big storage capability. And it sold for only $3,600 in 1982. And everyone kept saying, why do you need that much space to hold stuff? Since the competitor to that were these floppy disks right here, and they held 143 kilobytes. They noticed I could manage, and they asked me to take over as the group product manager for the Apple III product line. And then when the executive committee in their infinite wisdom shut the product line down, the president called me into his office, John Scully, and said, we got $20 million in piece parts, what should we do about it? And I told him, if you give me the authority commensurate with responsibility, just like Kelly Johnson's Skunk Works, just like the soul of a new machine, and you give people the authority commensurate with responsibility and get the job done. So we did. We sold 25,000 of these. It became the third most popular computer in the world in 1983, after the Apple II and the PDP-11 from Digital Equipment Corporation. We generated enough profits to fund Steve Jobs' Macintosh development program and to employ about 1,000 to 1,500 of the best and brightest people in Silicon Valley, because Apple only hired the best and the brightest and paid them about 40% more than anybody else. And then we shut the product line down. On the same day the Apple IIc was announced, did not affect the stock price, and we took care of all of the people that had been working on it, the 500 hardware and software vendors. And I write of that experience in this book that I just released on Amazon, Building Insanely Great Products, lessons from 47 years of experience at HP, Apple, 75 products and 11 startups later. And your parents can go to Amazon.com and buy a copy for you. The book on the left is The Foundations in the Successful Management of Products. It's actually a 7-part series, about 900 pages. And it's being used in the postgraduate degree programs at Manipal University, and I hope soon at also in Porto University in Portugal. What motivates me is that about $1.6 trillion is spent every year or more in new product and enhanced product research and development worldwide. But about 35 to 45% of them have failed, representing about $500 billion to $750 billion. And a lot of lives were upset because those people were out of jobs, and a lot of resources were wasted. So if I could help teach the world what it takes to make your products successful and succeed, then that waste will go down and there'll be more resources for everybody else. And the way you start doing that is understanding what your customer does. A lot of courses in innovation starts out, for example, with brainstorming, where you come up with hundreds of ideas and then you try to prioritize it and whittle it down in order to develop your product. I propose to you that that's wrong and it doesn't work, and it contributes to that nearly $750 billion in product failure. This is the product lifecycle framework that I developed that takes a product from the beginning, way up there in the left-hand corner, all the way down here to end of life, and all the steps that need to go into getting that done. There's about 130 competencies required in order to be a product manager, or as I prefer to call them, the product success officer, or product success manager. I'm going to talk just briefly about the little do box there in the upper left-hand corner, and then the values box in the upper left-hand corner, because that's where the product success begins. One of the reasons you don't ask people what they want is because they don't really know what they want. And there's a story going around that says if Henry Ford, when he was inventing the Model T, if he went out and asked people if they would like a car, they would have said, no, I don't want a car. They wouldn't have any idea what a car is. If he did a keyword search on the internet to find out what problems people were searching for, they weren't searching for car. It was not possible. And that's a very important point in terms of this concept of the wisdom of the crowds, and big data knows more and better than everybody else. Well, if you don't know that there's a solution for something, and you don't know what to call it, no amount of wisdom of the crowds, or I call it wisdom of the mob, is going to be able to help you discover that in big data. And that's one of the big problems that we've had in this last election. It's sort of like you're driving along the road, there's a car wreck, and everybody slows down and stops. Well, that happens to be the most popular thing right then. So Facebook and Google amplified that, and that's what they put on your Facebook feeds and on your Google searches, was looking at the train wreck or looking at the car wreck. So Henry allegedly was told, no, I don't want a car, I just want a faster horse. If you think about that, what did the people really wanted to do? They don't care how they get from point A to point B. They just want to get there faster. And getting there faster is a form of innovation. So others, and this is a major thing here in the Valley, start innovating with the technology. And that's wrong too. The technology is oftentimes a solution searching for a problem. And if you don't find the right problem for that technology, then you'll not succeed. Asking for ideas, if you run the calculation, you have to come up with 15 unmet needs in order to have a successful product, which means you have to come up with 14 million ideas, and then sometime in the lifetime of all of us here combined, you have to get rid of all of those ideas that's not going to work, and to get down to the 15 unmet needs. So that's another reason why this brainstorming concept is absolutely silly. What you do is find out what people want to do. And that's in terms of first understand what they want to do, then you do your innovation, and then you do the other things. And it becomes very easy to write your value proposition if you know what the product is going to do for people, because that's what people want to do. So how do you define a do? It's about outcomes. It's not about technology. And it's those questions. What does your customer do? How do they do it? When do they do it? Why do they do it? Where do they do it? Who do they do it for? How do they do it? And what's standing in your way? And you obtain that information first by observing people on how they're doing it, then interview them, then do a survey, and then compare it to big data if any big data is available. You ask them about those do's, how important they are, and you ask them how satisfied they are with the current solution. I saw someplace that there's like 15,000 programs for developing emoticons for your iPhone. Why do people keep creating those things? Where they're looking at what other people are doing. They're not looking at the satisfaction. If just one of those 15,000 satisfies somebody to get an emoticon, they don't care about the other 14,000. So let me shift to values and vision. If you take a company's values and you combine it with their mission statement or the vision, that becomes the company culture. And this is the HP way. Trust and respect for individuals, focus on a high level of achievement, uncompromising integrity, teamwork, flexibility, and innovation. And they also said it's okay to fail, because the best way you can learn is if you fail. When I was teaching people how to fly in the least hospitable classroom in the world, where it's about 130 decibel level, and the student is scared to death of dying, it's kind of hard to teach. But you let them make mistakes, and they learn from those mistakes. And that's how people best, in many cases, learn. I mentioned earlier the company grew 20% a year for 50 years, record not surpassed by no other company. Yet 3/5 of all the companies on the Fortune 500 from its first list are no longer around. And I went back and looked at it in terms of values. Did they have values? Did they follow the values? And if they didn't, those companies tended to be out of business. And I was going, as I did that study, I wonder if that applies to me. So I made a little table, and it had a list of my values. And then I compared it to the companies I was involved in. Did they have them? Did they follow them? And did I feel compatible with them? And I've been involved with about 25 organizations. And sure enough, 20 of them where I either got fired or quit, it was an incompatibility in values. And the 5 that I thrived at, we are in full agreement on values. So what I recommend to you is when you start looking for a job, even if it's an internship for the summer, first thing you should do is write down what your values are, and then ask your hiring manager what their values are and what the organization's values are. And if it's not a match, run away from it as fast as you possibly can. These are the Apple values, and they gave us at Apple, all of us, a little desk plaque, which you can have on your desk to remind you of it every single day. And we walked into meetings at Apple, when we walked into meetings at HP, everybody had the same values. So someone wasn't there just for return on investment, or just for market share, or just for profit margin. We knew why everybody was there, and we would make decisions about how we're going to do the product based upon those values. And you guys will do the same thing as you go through life. You'll have a core set of values, and you'll compare everything to that, mostly unknowingly, but it's nice if you write it down so you explicitly understand what's going on. So ask yourself, what are your values? Let's shift to talking about you. But first, let me suggest that you connect with me on LinkedIn. How many people here have a LinkedIn profile? How many people here know what LinkedIn is? Great. I recommend you start developing your LinkedIn profile. And at the top of that profile, put there what it is that you're selling. So when someone comes and looks at your profile, they know what you're selling. Well, right now, you're in the process of building your connections, which you'll use later to find jobs, because it's all about networking. And later, what you're selling is yourself. So start putting each of your experiences on there. It's going to be as long as you want, because the search engines will search everything. And soon enough, you'll get older, you'll have enough experience on there, and people will start finding you, and they'll be reaching out to you to see if they'd like you to join their organization. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and if you do, these are the 9 online courses I have. Each one costs $200, and I'll give you one of them for free. Just connect with me on LinkedIn and ask for the course, and I'll send you a coupon to it. And it takes you through the entire product lifecycle, which is the top line, and the bottom line is additions to that product lifecycle. Now I'm going to play a little video. Saw this movie, I Am, about 5 years ago, and it's relevant to your situation today. Let's see if it works.
My name is Tom Shadyac. I'm a movie director.
Action!
Facing my own death brought an instant sense of clarity and purpose.
Euphoria.
I decided to grab a camera and a film crew of 4 and start a journey to spark a conversation around challenging and rarely asked questions.
Have you ever seen any of my movies? Did you ever see Ace Ventura? Ace Ventura? Did you ever hear that movie? It's a Jim Carrey movie. No.
We are asking some of today's significant minds, what's wrong with our world and what can we do about it? Most importantly, what we could do about it.
Science has discovered elements that undermine everything we've been told about how we work and how the world works.
We are more interconnected with each other at a fundamental level than people realize or previously thought.
The truth of who we are is that we are because we belong.
The basis of nature is cooperation and democracy. It's in our DNA.
We're just at the point where technology and this narrative are beginning to come together.
The science shows us that we are all connected.
Very deep connections at a very deep level.
This is the most profound discovery in all of physics.
What we do at the individual level really does affect the global environment.
We're really geared at a primordial level to feel what another person feels.
It's like we are born to be our brother's keeper. It's the way that we're wired.
This is the emergent story.
We are far grander than we've been told.
We started by asking what's wrong with the world, and we ended up discovering what's right with it.
Very powerful film. I strongly recommend that you see it. So let me ask you 2 questions. Who's the best person in this room? Me? No. Anybody? Who? This guy? He's right. You all are. You are all the most important person in this room. The best person in this room. Who's the worst person in this room? That's right. You are. And you are if you don't grab the brass ring and run for it. So go get it. Thank you.
All right, so we have time for a few questions.
Oh, that's
so
right.
raise
Okay.
your hand, and there will be people walking around with microphones so that we can actually hear them.
How do you feel about the opportunities that you've been given?
I think they've been very good. I think the ones where my values matched, I was able to thrive. Where the ones where the values didn't match, I was terribly upset and I wasn't very happy. So that's why I say, pick the ones that match your values, that will make you happy.
What motivated you? What motivated you?
What motivated me? When I was going through the leadership training at the Civil Air Patrol, I learned about something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's in a triangle. The bottom of the triangle is having food, clothing, shelter, and you move all the way up to the top of self-actualization. And I was pretty much near the top. I was a son of a plumber, so we had lots of plumbing and we had some money. So that wasn't a big deal. And we had a house and I had clothes, which I didn't care about then and still don't now. And so that's all that was important. And I boiled it down to then just 2 things: the need to be wanted and accepted and the need to accomplish something. So I enjoyed to get things done every single day. And I don't know about the wanted and accepted. I went home after I got appointed distinguished professor, and I asked my daughter if I could now please just get a little bit of respect, and she said no. I then asked my best friend, and he said no. And I asked my wife, and she said definitely not. So I don't know about the wanted part. Does that answer your question? Wanted it, accepted, and get things done. And that's the one nice thing about this event is you're able to accomplish things here. You can achieve things. Other questions?
Is there anything you regret?
Yes. I was the campaign manager for Al Quie for governor of the state of Minnesota. And I and two other people, we are called the, I forget what they called us, but we won the governorship. 2 U.S. senators took control of the House of Representatives and the Senate of Minnesota in 1978. And then John Conley asked me to run his presidential campaign. John was the guy that was sitting in the front of the car when John F. Kennedy was shot and killed in Dallas. He got hit by a bullet too, and he told me he forgot to duck. The thing I regret is we brought forth this concept of the Art Laffer curve that said if you cut taxes, the economy would explode. Well, that's true in the early 60s when the marginal tax rates, I forget what they were, like 50, 75%. But when Reagan did it, the economy didn't explode. We just had more government shortfalls for infrastructure and highways and schools and training and education and everything. And then when Bush did a little of it, when he funded, I think it was the pharmacy program without any income to balance that out. And of course, Trump's new budget has got a $2 trillion math mistake in it, all based upon the Art Laffer curve. And I helped bring that concept to the public, and we campaigned on it. And Ronald Reagan then campaigned on it, and that's the thing that George Bush called voodoo economics. So I apologize for bringing that concept forward because that's affected millions of lives.
What results would I get if I searched you up on Google?
You'd probably get about 6 or 7 pages of things that I've been doing recently.
Can I get your autograph?
Sure. How many people here know who Larry David is? Okay, a few people. He's a famous comedian with adult comedy on HBO. So in a few years, all of a sudden, he started looking exactly like me. And so I used to look like, I forget the guy's Frank Judd or something like that was on a television show I never watched called Taxi. And when I'd be walking through an airport, people would come up to me and ask for my autograph, and I said, sure, it's only $10. And now they come up to me and say, are you Larry David? He was the co-author of Seinfeld, which was a very funny show, about 10 years ago. And now he has Curb Your Enthusiasm on HBO. So now when they come up to me and ask for my autograph, I say, sure, but that'll be $20. So I hope you all have enough money today. Other questions?
So I think we'll take one more, and it'll be our instructor back here.
Hi. So what would you say to an aspiring project manager?
It's a product manager.
Product manager.
Yeah, and that's why I want to change the name to product success manager. A project manager identifies tasks that needs to get done and then schedules it out. A product manager does just about all those things I showed you in the framework. They figure out what the product's going to do for the customer, living in the world of what is the problem, and then they provide that to the engineering team who then lives in the world of trying to find the solution. And they put together the entire product market strategy or product market plan, which is the positioning of the product, the market research, the competitive research, the ideation, the innovation, all the way through distribution and channels and prioritizing and product positioning and so forth. And then they put together the marketing plan using those as fundamentals in order to take the product to market. So there's a difference between a product manager, which does a lot more than a project manager. And like I said, I prefer to call them product success managers.
All right, well, if we can give one big round of applause for David once again.
Thank you.